Welcome back, friends, to the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we are off. I am on my honeymoon right now, so if you'll forgive me, we are going to be releasing a former Patreon exclusive episode. This is going to be on Room 237, which is on some of the weirder sides of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Yeah, some of the theories that are out there. There's some wild ones in
some
this
wacky
documentary.
Ones.
It's kind of an infamous documentary, actually.
It is. I think it's a little fun, especially if you're a fan of the material. I think there's some stuff that you might be like scratching your head and say, hey, maybe.
Yeah, maybe there's some weight to some of these.
There's some stuff that's clearly bullshit, but it's still fun all the same. This is kind of the lighter side to conspiracy theories. Just don't fall down a rabbit hole, and
right.
keep it light. Think of maybe what if.
Yeah, this was a fun one. We thought it would be good leading up to Halloween here, since we're not able to do our regular coverage. We're going to do this one here, and then we have another somewhat spooky project next week. But we're going to be gone for about a month here as you are celebrating your nuptials. So we appreciate everyone's patience during this period.
I promise we will be back soon. We will be getting into some really fun stuff. We have some big plans. Hopefully all those hold up. And we got some good stuff coming. So look forward to that. And for now, let's listen to this former Patreon exclusive. We are covering Rodney Asher's 2012 documentary, Room 237, otherwise known as one of the major Shining documentaries. So I want to also give context this. I think this documentary, when it came out, I was fascinated with, and watching it now, I'm realizing it was so much more fun before conspiracy theories and misinformation were just the norm in our lives.
Yeah.
And I'm watching it now, and I'm like, a bunch of these people are just fucking bullshitting. They're just making up a bunch of batshit crazy stuff.
I'm glad that you feel that way. So I had heard of this documentary a bunch, in almost it's so out there, but you gotta see it, that kind of reverence for it. I don't know if that's reverence or just it had that reputation. So I went into it kind of interested, I knew it was going to talk about moon landing stuff, because that was kind of the infamous stuff, that the moon landing was faked, and this was Kubrick's admitting that. So I already kind of went in knowing that was going to be a bunch of horse shit, because that's all been debunked. Every theory about that has been debunked. So I was like, okay, well, I'm curious to see what other stuff is in here, right? It's not all, completely out of the realm of possibility. Some of it, we'll get into. I'm like, yeah, that could be true, or there at least could be a bit of that going on. But all in all, it's just a bunch of people spouting random ass harebrained theories that they probably had while high. They give very little corroborating evidence.
Exactly.
They just say shit, and then the documentary just moves on as if that what they just said is true. It kind of pissed me off. Honestly, by the end of it, I felt tired and angry. It was the way I felt at the end of it.
So I noticed something on this viewing, and it has to do with the perspective of the documentarian, right? Clearly, Kubrick is very meticulous. He's very detail oriented. He could have very well been adding some subtext for some of these things, but even if he, the whole faking the moon landing thing, he could have been fucking with people who were saying that he was faking the moon landing.
I think that is far more likely. If you're something's happening, it's people had been saying he faked the moon landing, so he put some fucking shit in there to make them go crazy and go see the movie a million times.
Right. So but from the perspective of the documentarian, I noticed this time that they allowed the people that they were interviewing to bumble and fumble over their words, lose trains of thought, get interrupted, kind of seem all over the place. And I think that it's about the essence of all of these stories, and I don't think the documentarian is actually even trying to say any of these are really true. These are just kind of what this movie does to people, and the way that it becomes this huge cultural phenomenon, and the way that it affects people, and they dive into it. I mean, the idea of there's absolutely no way Kubrick was wanting viewers to put the movie on forward progression and backwards, overlaid on top of each other to look for some sort of
that's some Dark Side of the Moon shit right there.
Yeah, it just wasn't that wasn't true. But there's some seeds here that are really fun to pick up on, and I think the documentary as a whole is kind of commenting on what Kubrick did here. The movie's excellent.
The Shining is excellent.
What did I say?
You said the movie's excellent. I just want to make sure we're making it clear. I don't agree that this documentary is excellent. Before you
I wouldn't even argue that. Yeah.
Before you get too far along on that theory, that occurred to me, and I was like, I think there could be this sort of like through line of look how ridiculous this is. Look what it's doing to people. I don't think it does that well, if that is the actual goal. I think it fails on that regard because it doesn't ever show these people. They're just like voices over random, like mostly from the Shining video, but also just from other random stuff. Nothing's really followed up on. Nothing's ever, we don't ever see the documentarian. We hear him like twice, like maybe. So all of that is like so deeply embedded, and you can maybe argue like in a meta way, it wanted it to be like the hidden message behind this documentary. And that may be true, but I just don't think it succeeds if that was its goal. Instead, it presents a bunch of these conspiracy theories without criticism, and perpetuates them. And if you want to read into that's what actually is what's going on, okay, but I don't know, like, I feel like you've worked on more documentaries than me. You probably know a lot more about, like, what the goal of them is and how people approach them. But to me, it just seemed like if that was the goal, it wasn't approached the right way.
I can see that. Like I said before, I do think that this is in a different context than today's
that's
documentaries.
Fair.
You know what I mean? Like, this is made in 2012. It's kind of a naive time period for, like, the idea of misinformation and all of that.
It was made in 2012? I thought this was, like, an older doc than that.
No, 2012.
Wow, okay. I give it even less. Like, that's not that long ago.
But I don't think they had the foresight to know that, like, these people all sound like QAnon, and I don't think that they, you know what I mean? They take such leaps to go to some of these places.
Yeah.
So I just don't think that like, I think that they were addressing two things. Kubrick made this super complex film, and I do think that maybe there's some weight to the idea that he wanted to challenge himself with this film and create some subtlety and some subtext that is highly interpretive.
Yeah, there is some weight to some of these theories, right? And there's something going on that they're picking up on, and then they're sometimes leaping to wild conclusions about it and acting like that's proof.
I think it's also like kind of darkly funny. Like, a lot of the things that they're bringing up end up being just hilarious.
That's true. I laughed about it. You can kind of look at it as also like a meta commentary about over analyzing a film. Like over-analysis, over-critiquing, like going frame by frame, like what are you really benefiting from that? Because I kept thinking, like, if you assume, as one of the commenter does, that the director of whatever movie you're watching is actually a mega-mind super genius who is he consumes all of culture and reflects it at us through his filmmaking. Like, he had some, like, wild statement about that.
It was awesome. Hilariously awesome.
And I was like, okay, if you assume that about whoever you're watching, then all of a sudden you can go frame by frame in any movie and start making wild connections and start going like, that poster looks like a minotaur, when it totally doesn't. And then you make all kinds of wild connections once you've confirmed, quote unquote, air quotes, that is a minotaur.
Having a labyrinth in your film already brings the imagery of a minotaur. You don't have to have that in exactly.
And the poster does not look like a minotaur. I don't know how, like, they kept showing it up close and she kept describing it. I'm like, that is a person skiing. What are you talking about?
That's the funniest part. Like, I think the documentary is also saying, like, these people look like they'll say, like, it's almost like they're going off the top of their head too. They're like,
memory.
In the clouds, if like right after the title goes away, you're gonna see Kubrick's face. I'm like, no, you fucking can't. And I think the documentary is saying that too.
You might as well be saying, like, you see a triceratops. Like, it's just, you see it's a cloud shapes. Come on.
That's kind of the thing. Like, get high and look at clouds.
I agree that that could be the message of the documentarian, but I don't think that comes across though. You know, like, I think if you wanted that to be the message, there was some more steps that needed to be taken there.
Yeah.
For one, show these people. I don't know, like, because it doesn't feel like it's about them. It feels like it's about The Shining. And if it's about these people, I think we should have seen them.
I actually thought that maybe at the end, I forgot. I was like, maybe they reveal each person at the end to, like, show them.
Yeah.
Documentary filmmaking is interesting because I don't care what anybody says, you can't be unbiased as a documentarian. Like, you're making decisions in the edit, you're making decisions when you're sitting there with the person, you're interviewing someone, and, like, you can get them to retake things, you can get them to say things differently. You can just say, oh, say that a little differently, say that like this. You can push and pull a documentary to being biased. it's so interesting that in this documentary, like I said, they didn't cut out the rough edges, the kid interrupting the guy, the
Yeah, that was like a big one that drew a lot of attention. I was like, okay, this is really unusual. This guy gets interrupted by his child, and he like goes into the other room
and they leave it in.
They leave it in. It's in the movie.
So I think that's really the documentary, like maybe trying to say, look how unbiased I'm being. I'm letting all these people put their...
Maybe, but it also just felt sloppy though. Like, is this just somebody who's making a sloppy movie and I don't know anything about this person? Have they just put together a bunch of conspiracies and they're just not very good at, because it wasn't like it was particularly well edited.
It's not, and like you said, they're not interrogating any of this stuff. They're just like kind of putting it out there. And I think that's a little naive because that is like kind of the point, is like you want people to walk away with some viewpoint on it. But nearing the end of the film, as everything was coming together and there's people talking about, like, I think it was actually the guy who was like, everything in culture is being distilled here and talked about and all that. I think that like we're getting back-to-back moments from different people with that kind of being the front load of it, where they're talking about like what the movie represents, what it was like, what it did to culture when it came out in the 80s, like the filmmaker that was working on it, the fact that it was a Stephen King work that was adapted, like all these different elements.
Also, it seemed like half the people talking didn't read the book. And so they were like, can you believe this detail? It's so weird. It has no reason to be there. And it's like, it does have a reason to be there. It's in the book. And if you read the book, it makes more sense. But instead, it's just a holdover. And in the movie, it seems like it has no reason, but there was a story behind, the twins. There was a story behind, like, there were certain things that the explanation is just read the book. And they, as much as they're going down these rabbit holes, coming up with bizarre ideas about what it could mean, it's like, just read the source material, and then a lot of this becomes clear.
Leaving the rough edges in, like I said, I think leaves room there for you to say, like, okay, they're trying to say whether they are or not. They're trying to say they're being unbiased, and then they're giving us all of these... They're giving us all these viewpoints. So like a couple of things, Native American imagery, I think there definitely is. We talked about it in our Shining episode long ago. There definitely is. I don't know that he's necessarily, I think that he's acknowledging the fact that exists in that area, like in Colorado, in these areas. These are native lands.
It's talked about how Native Americans died during the construction of the Overlook Hotel. So he's showing Native American imagery to remind us of that. And the idea that they're haunting this place is like persistent in frame. That's all it is. It doesn't need to be anything more than that.
Well, and ultimately, like, it's all interpretive. You can add whatever you want to it, but going around telling people it's fact and saying, like, this is actually what he meant when he did this is, like, pretty
and the
bold.
idea that it's about the Native American genocide is more plausible than a lot of the other shit we get in here.
Sure.
Even the stuff with the Holocaust, I thought, maybe there's a little bit, especially when that guy talked about how he was, like, working on a Holocaust film that never got made. I was like, I could see it being in his head and him, like, maybe even putting in a little bit of numerology if he was into that kind of thing, and like putting in the number 42 a lot. And I guess that applies to World War II and different 1921 and like all these things. Yeah, like
they were also pulling in like the idea of like animated cartoons and stuff that he was kind of referencing in certain ways. And I'm like, yeah, that's just like kind of how these things progress. Like, yes, that may have been some sort of commentary about culture and politics in the 1920s or whenever that was made, 1930s. But like that's the point, is that like when you see a film and something's referenced, it's not just like the specific thing out of context. It's like you're getting all the context that comes along with it. You're getting, the influence of the influencer, you know what I mean? So like the person who made that was influenced by something, and then Kubrick picks it up and runs with it. And then that just keeps going on. And I think that's like an interesting part of art, especially once you start getting sort of referential and like having these sort of callbacks. But yeah, I mean, just going as deep as they do, it's always a leap. There's always a leap somewhere. Like it starts out usually from where I'm like, okay, well, there's some evidence here, and then it's just boom, off the deep end.
Yeah.
The sexual imagery and like the idea of abuse, that was like obviously like there's some sexual stuff that happens in the film, yes, in The Shining.
I think there is some evidence that there could, or at least he was trying to make us feel uncomfortable about it, and the implication that there could be some sort of abuse going on. I think that's all there. I don't think when that guy stands up, it was intended to be a hard-on.
That was my biggest laugh of the movie, by the way. The frame by frame. So the documentary takes everything frame by frame because the guy asks us to.
Yeah.
So we go frame by frame, and then like it's this build up, and the reveal happens right as it lands, and the guy's saying it at the same time. So the guy slightly turns, and there's like a bin for papers, and it just lines up with his crotch. And they're like, "Oh, it's totally supposed to be like some Freudian like hard on." And I'm just like, that was the funniest thing by far in the documentary to me.
Well, I think that's the same guy who then the next reveal is the Stanley Kubrick face in the clouds. So that's the kind of evidence we're getting from that guy.
But just to say, like, you don't understand, I'm a massive Shining fan, and if you go frame by frame in the entire movie, like I have, you're gonna see.
I think he was like writing a book about it too. He's like, that'll all be revealed in my book.
Yeah, it's so good.
And these people are just a name usually too. There's no context for like, do they have any sort of credentials? Is this a critic? Is this no? It's just usually just a name, and then they move on. And it's you don't ever see them. It's just a talking voice over these images, and a lot of it's like other films of Stanley Kubrick. You know, like just being shown for. It felt like kind of like watching a YouTube video these days.
Sure.
Although it was in 2012, like YouTube existed. It felt like I was watching a YouTube video, but like a bad one.
High production value though, like they spent the money to like create animations for some things, and like
yes, that's true.
Like for example, like the archorchitecture.
I guess that they made that. I wasn't clear though, because like maybe they borrowed that from something else.
Yeah,
or took that.
I assumed as well. So maybe we'll have to look into that. But I do want to say the thing that holds the most weight, other than the idea of. I think clearly Kubrick has high intelligence. I don't know that he's some crazy person that can foresee everything.
Consumer of all culture. Yeah.
I don't know that that's him, but clearly he was very smart. And maybe with his filmmaking, he did feel like he hit a sort of plateau and he wanted to challenge himself.
Sure.
And I think that's possibly what he's doing here in this film.
The idea that he might have been bored and started playing games. Totally plausible.
Totally plausible. And also, in that same context, he's meticulous. We know his attention to detail. And the continuity errors, I think, are all intentional. The idea of, like, the architecture...
Yes, but the ideas that they draw from those continuity errors are the thing where I'm not sure. And yes. It's also possible there is continuity error in there. Like, at one point, they show the fact that you can see the helicopter. Like, he probably didn't want that accidental. If he had known. That's an accident. If he's capable of making an accident... then any of these continuity errors could be accident.
Danny sitting down playing with his toys and the pattern going in a specific track and he's kind of drawing and then it flipping, that's absolutely intentional.
Yeah, because it shows him sort of encircled in a way that...
They had to flip the room to get the other shot. Like, they had to completely change the set over. So there's no way that they didn't do that on purpose.
But the dopey being removed, I'm not sure that means anything. That could be an accident. Or it could have been like they shot something before they added that one later because they thought it looked good.
Yeah. Seems silly and I just feel like everybody knows the rules on set and like wardrobe and like production design. Everybody knows. So you would think you would design that, you would get it all set up, and then you would leave it, even if something needed to change for continuity. The idea that may have changed, I do think that there's some weight to him fucking around with stuff in the background to also put people
the chair moving. I think that was probably intentional because there are certain things that make the Overlook feel haunted. So changing things like that subliminally probably does make it feel haunted. And that could all be intentional.
And the biggest case of this that I think works really well is him, the layout of the hotel makes no sense. And that's like them trying to analyze that is like, that's the point, right? Like that he absolutely did that on purpose because they could have just shot the hotel.
She did lose a little bit of credibility when she was like, I haven't like measured or like, done any sort of graph paper or any of this. This is just me kind of, estimating how far he rides and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, you're losing a little bit of credibility.
Everybody comes with a grain of salt, like a whole bucket of salt.
And I swear there was one time where they were showing the graphic about Danny turning, and I'm like, he didn't turn. Like, I was watching it, and it was like weird. It was like they included an extra turn in there somewhere that I wasn't seeing on screen. I'd have to watch it again. But again, like when they're showing the evidence, I'm like, I don't know about some of this stuff. I do believe, at the very least, at the minimum, the third one they show, he's on the bottom floor and then he's on the top floor. But there's also a cut where he turns a corner and we don't see him. So you could extrapolate out that he like picked up his thing and walked upstairs and then got back on it. And we just didn't see that.
They were also commenting on like what Jack Torrance and Wendy were doing at the time. And I'm like, that's not how film works. Like they don't have to happen simultaneously. Like you can kind of show it out of order and however the filmmaker wants to. But they were saying like, it was directly reflecting what was going on with Jack and Wendy. And I'm like, yeah, there's maybe some weight to that, but also it's not like a necessity. As far as changes to like the I felt like the dissolves are such an easy thing for people to point to. Like, yes, he was very careful about the way that he set his dissolves. Like, there's no question that, like, compositionally, he was trying to get things that looked interesting to dissolve together. They're like, oh my God, the ladder lines up with the top of the hotel. I'm like, yeah, he definitely fucking did that on purpose.
It's then when they take that to mean something, like, wild, where you're like, okay, well, I mean, he definitely did it because they looked similar, and he liked the idea of the visual similarity. And then he probably did it just to be like, all right, here's the thing, and you can interpret it how you want. That's what these people are doing. They're just really running with it and asserting it as fact.
Yeah. They have the dissolve. They're like, there's the guy mopping in the lobby, and he's like mopping the green or whatever, like mopping all the grass. I'm like, well, that means nothing. That's just. I think that just happens because he wanted to get the steeples to line up with the ladder and everything.
Yeah. And then like the luggage with the people standing in the lobby, it's just a cluster of things, and it kind of overlaps, and it like that visually makes sense. It draws your eye. It's just kind of a cool way to do that. I don't think it means much more about it. Was like implying that these people were like luggage or like we're going to be in boxes or something. And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe
that was like a Holocaust thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Holocaust evidence.
Yeah. The dissolve with his hair lining up with his like the punch in dissolve of Jack Torrance with like trying to do like a Hitler thing. I'm like, I mean,
yeah, probably was a happy accident. Like it probably accidentally happened, and he probably looked at it and was like, "Oh, that's kind of funny. I'll leave it in," or "That's kind of interesting. I'll leave it in because he is a villain, right? So we'll just leave it in. He looks kind of like Hitler for a moment." And that's if he noticed it, which is possible he didn't notice it, and that's just a funny accident with the dissolve. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, if you assume someone is doing everything intentionally down to that level of detail, you can get a little wild with it. But like, these are also human beings making movies. Sometimes there are going to be things that happen unintentionally. And they address that a little bit. One guy at one point says, like, oh, even if he didn't intend this, it's still true. And it's like, okay, yes, it can still be true that you interpreted it that way. Doesn't mean it's objectively true.
And that's the thing about art, right? It's like ultimately, like, you know, he made the film, he put as much as he could into it. And like, if there's going to be somebody who is like the most detail oriented, like he's got to be like in a pantheon of like top 10 most like, you know, psychotic for the details. Like he was absolutely a crazy person.
So he cultivated that reputation. So that's one of the reasons why this happens. Like another example is like when he's at the bar and they're like calling out the line from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon. And he's like, why would he say that? Well, it had to do with like the way, I don't even remember what their explanation was. It was some random bullshit, but it's a line from the book.
And it's a line from the book because, like, if you're in Portland, Oregon, or in Portland, Maine, you draw a straight line across the U.S. That's where you end up.
Stephen King, right?
Yeah.
He's from Maine, so he thinks about Portland, Maine, and he thinks about how there's a Portland, Oregon, and they're on either side of the country. So he says from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon. It's in the book, and I think Jack might be from Maine or something. There's some sort of Maine connection because it's a King book. So like, it makes more sense in the book, and they didn't read the book. Instead, they're just going wild on the movie. He's like, why would he ever say that? Okay, settle down. We got to talk about the moon stuff, right? I am not going to go through and refute every claim this person made. That's not something I want to do. It has been done. His smoking gun stuff about the footage is all bullshit. None of that is true. There's reasons for all of it. It was the most maddening part of it because this is the flat earth kind of conspiracy theory bullshit that gets trotted out. And these people say they have the smoking gun. And then if you're watching a video or something like that, you're already in kind of a little echo chamber where it's going to be a bunch of people who tend to agree with you. And if you don't turn around and seek outside resources and try and like deliberately look for people who might have debunked it, it's very easy for you to take that as proof. And then before you know it, it becomes a core part of your identity that you believe that this is a conspiracy. And every bit of evidence now that comes along is all part of the conspiracy. This is how conspiracy theories start and why they fester in people's minds. And it was funny that the guy kept asserting that he wasn't saying that they faked the moon landing. Because the implication, he's like, just the footage was faked. And the implications of that is just so bizarre. It's like,
he's like, the NASA people got mad at me because basically I was like, you guys have nice tools and all that other stuff, and you're able to do it, but this is all fake. It's like, what would be the point?
Yeah, no, it's all bullshit. It's all been debunked. Like officially, like there's explanations for everything he says that make sense. And Stanley Kubrick, I think Stanley Kubrick was absolutely trolling people about it. I think he deliberately put Danny in that little sweater, and he maybe made some references. I don't think the 2 times 3 times 7 is 237,000 miles from here to like none of that. Like no, or all those little numerology things, and the idea that he was actually like the whole movie's about how he was ashamed of the fact that he had done this and that he was hiding it from his wife. Like none of that is
what
true.
Was the thing? I don't you understand that I like the line from Jack Torrance is like, don't you understand that I have responsibilities to my employer, and like that was meant to be like him saying it to everybody, like the US government, I have to abide by what they say, okay?
Yeah, and then at the end the guy's like, and they're watching me and they're tapping my phones and there's people on the corners and like all this stuff, and you're like, all right.
The other thing too is like if Kubrick was admitting and like I have no fucking question in my mind that all of this is false. Like the moon landing was real. Everything that we know about space travel, everything we know about technology and science confirms that. And we grew up on the Space Coast. We're so close to it. We know it like the back of our hand.
And specifically the footage has been broken down by people who are experts in this kind of stuff to say that this is real footage from the moon. There's just things that people don't understand about the moon, and they make these big leaps about it to quote unquote disprove it. And it's all been debunked. Like it is real. Like, the conspiracy has been debunked.
But let's pretend in this fake world that this guy lives in that like this was a fake moon landing that Kubrick made. If he made such an unsubtle confession in The Shining, the U.S. government would have taken him out. You know what I mean? This is not. It's not subtle enough for him to.
Imagine a world where the U.S. government was that fucking crafty. You know, come on, no way. And they're gonna force one of the biggest directors in all of Hollywood to make a secret film. Totally implausible.
Not to mention, if he was known to have been, if everybody was already saying that he faked the moon landing and he put in an Apollo 11 sweater on a child in the movie, and you think that the U.S. government is going to miss that, it's hilarious. Like that's just like, it's going to be the biggest movie of the year. It's going to have people watching it.
Yeah.
Like
what's more likely, that or he's trolling the fuck out of these people because he thinks they're ridiculous and he's having a laugh. That's absolutely what he was doing.
Yeah. So good times. I think it's really at this point, it's a funny watch, and I think like. To me, the documentary does kind of still land in this interesting area where like it's making. I think all of that, those stories that it touches, that it allows people to tell, are in service of the idea of like the magnitude of what someone can create, someone like Kubrick can create, and then what it does to our culture and how art, once out of the hands of the creator, changes and is altered, and then just like what the time period that it came out and what it represented. It's just like this huge cultural phenomenon, and like a filmmaker wanting to make a film about The Shining, I totally understand, and like get to just geek out about The Shining and like, you know, hear all these conspiracies. It's funny and fun, and that's how I kind of view the movie at this point. It's like I would tell somebody to watch this because I'm like, it's just batshit crazy, man. It's worth having seen, I think, just to be able to be like trot it out even as a joke.
I guess so. I'm with you in the sense that I think that might be what its ultimate legacy is. Like divided, of course, because there's a bunch of people who believe it, and that's always going to be the problem with this. Is I just think that if your goal was to point out what it does to people, you needed to make an effort to make that point a little stronger. And there's a few things here or there you could have done. Introduce the documentarian a little more clearly, and that point of view a little more clearly. That's just my opinion of it.
Sure. I also wanted to note too, like the fact that. I feel like when I brought some of this stuff up in our Shining episode, like thinking back to it now, I'm like, maybe I should have said like the caveat of like a lot of this is just like kind of people crafting. Because I think in the episode itself, I haven't gone back to listen, but I assume that I brought some of this as like, oh, listen to all these different points that people have brought up. I don't think that I didn't allow it to become the conspiracy that these people jump to conclusions on. As far as like some of the visuals that go on, like the moon landing stuff and the Native American imagery and like some of the Holocaust stuff, I think I brought some of that up. But in hindsight, I'm like, man, I wish I would have like taken some of this stuff down a little more. But I just felt like it was good context for people to have as far as like what can be drawn from the film.
My memory of that episode, our episode on it, was that you brought that stuff up and Remy and I sort of reacted to it and kind of weighed in on whether we thought there was any weight to it. But you didn't bring it in like, this is fact. You were like, this is something some people have said. And we were like, I don't know about that.
Okay, good. Because I didn't remember. I'm hopeful, especially after watching this, I'm hopeful that we don't sound like crackpots now too. You know, like these people.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of them I wanted to highlight before we end here. There's one point where he's talking about the blood coming out of the elevator, And they're asserting, for whatever reason, I don't think it like has anything to do with their claim on it, but they're like, the elevator doesn't open. And they're showing it over and over again on screen. And one of the panels of the elevator door is opening as you watch it. You can see it moving. And they're like, it never opens. And then the blood pours out from the cracks. And I'm like, I'm watching it, man. It's opening. I can see it open. It's just one of the panels. It's not the full door, but it does open. It's like half opens.
Well, and that makes me think about, like I said, I think they're also like going off the top of their heads, and they're like going off their memories of these movies in some cases.
And they probably watched it on like a low res screen, you know, back in the day. And then the other one is the guy who plays it backwards and forward at the same time. At the very least, that guy sounded like a stoner, and he was like kind of laughing about it. And I think he kind of recognized that it was just some wild shit, like some wild overlap. But like, okay, if you have a thematically consistent movie that's telling a story and it's so hyper meticulous, and you're a specific kind of filmmaker who likes certain kinds of shots with certain like positions of where the person is in frame, if you play it backwards and forwards laid over each other, there's gonna be moments that overlap, and there's a certain like circularity to stories that often happens. So it's not going to be that surprising when like certain things overlap in a certain way and it looks like they were meant to be. It's like, no, it's just like, yeah, you're the same guy who made that later shot. It's all part of the same story. It's all thematically resonant with one another. If you start folding it in on each other, yeah, sometimes it's going to line up in interesting ways. It is like, I almost think that it would be a fun thing to do, to like have an edible and watch this overlaid version, because you could be like, look at the way that lines up. But it doesn't mean anything unless it means something cosmically in like the weird nature of our reality.
Coincidentally, yeah, like it's not like Kubrick planned any of that. But I think that's fun. I think that's a fun, different way to analyze art. Yeah, sure.
It was fun to see the way that like the bloody scene lined up with Jack Nicholson's face at one point. But like, that's not that wild. He's in a lot of the movie, so of course he's gonna be at parts on screen with it. It's not intentional.
Yeah, and to also just talk about like the idea of like composition. Like there's compositional tools. Like there's areas of symmetry that people use in composing a frame that are, you're gonna eventually reuse some of those tools and some of those components. And like you can look at paintings, you can look at modern metering and things that people use, overlays people use on their monitors, in you know, on cameras, on cell phones, on everything. And you can use all of these compositional tools to create objectively good looking shot. And there's something scientific to it. And like I can dig pretty far into it. Even in nature, symmetry exists. Like all of these things, like there's things that happen on a cellular level, on all the different spectrum of life, where things line up and it looks correct to us, and humans like order. And like, so that's why some of these frames are going to line up, is like, it's a fun coincidence, but certain times Jack Nicholson is going to look like he has blood coming out of his eyes, because that's just how they chose to use the same horizon line, and they chose to like, you know, center frame it, and guess what? It lined up.
Yeah, well, it's just a theory, man. Like, so a lot of this I wanted to just be like, this is just one person's theory. It's not fact. And the documentary, in my opinion, kind of presents this stuff as fact. I don't know. And that's where it was frustrating me, because it wouldn't like criticize that in any way, or like show an alternate theory to it. It was just like, here you go. This is
at least not for all of them. Like I said, there was like once or twice there where they would kind of show the thing on screen, and it would like say, look, this person's saying something that's like arguably false, or arguably like hard to interpret that way.
Yeah. But it didn't say that. It was just showing it to us, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
I guess I'm interpreting it as funny because they're wrong in a lot of cases, and like I thought that was the intention there.
Maybe. I did read that Stephen King watched this documentary, because he still famously does not like The Shining, right? He hated this.
I bet he did. I
think he said he turned it off halfway through because he got so frustrated with some of the bullshit.
Well, the funniest part too is like they're talking about Stephen King, and it's like the whole part with the red Volkswagen Beetle.
I don't think
and all that, and they're talking about like Kubrick being you know, like kind of saying fuck you and all this other stuff, and I was like, I mean, like, yeah, I guess like the red, I think there's some weight to that, the idea of there being like a wrecked red Beetle, because like that was the car that was in the book. It was just a
reference to the car in the book. I don't think it was saying fuck you to Stephen King. He was probably just like, I'm going to show a car wrecked here. Oh, how about I pull the one that he was in the book? That would be a fun little book reference. That's all it is. Like it's you know, putting all these other motivations behind things is so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. I love that at the end, the moon guy, faking the moon landing guy was like, he's like, I know I'm going to get audited on my taxes this year, and I'm looking out for the U.S. government. They're after me and shit. And I'm like, all right, like that gives you like all that you need to know about this guy is that he is paranoid and he's conspiracy theorist. So
yeah. So I mean, that was interesting watch. It was not what I expected. I don't know what I expected, man, because I knew it had the moon stuff in there, and I knew I was gonna bump against that, but I guess I thought there would be more weight to some of this other stuff, and that like most of it was gonna feel like, oh, that's that could be true, and I would be kind of intriguing, but like most of it just ended up feeling like complete horseshit or just some person's random idea, and then they were asserting it as true, and I was like, if I was in a room with this person, I would say I don't agree with you, like that's not it's just an interpretation. That's the thing. Like they're just interpreting things, and they're putting their own spin on it, and then acting as if that is the objective truth about what they're seeing. And they've unlocked some sort of secret, and I'm like, man, it's not a secret. It's not a secret. And some of this stuff, like it's random. He's just doing it to fuck with us. Like the reason, like the typewriter changes colors, probably just fucking random to make us feel unsettled, and like that's not. Continuity errors, some of them were intentional to make us feel like something's wrong here. That doesn't feel right. That looks different now, but in a way that I can't put my finger on. That's all it is. It doesn't have to have all these other meanings that involve numerology and symbolism and all this stuff. And it's like some of that maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah. At the beginning of the doc, somebody comes in and they talk about how like they saw it in the theater in 1980 and they just left with a feeling, and like they were like, it wasn't even a scary movie. Everybody I knew wanted it to be scarier. But it left me unsettled, and I watched it over and over again over the years, and now it's led to this. I do think that there's something to that. I think that there's an almost unidentifiable terror that's built into this film. I don't think any of these theories like fucking are the reason why. But I do think that like this movie, I've heard tons of people watch it, and they're like, yeah, it wasn't scary. And there's just some inherent like terror to this film. Like it's just like overbearing. And maybe it has something to do with those techniques of like keeping you so on your back foot. But man, there's something indescribable, and I think that that's also kind of what the doc is wanting people to like question and think about.
Sure, and we talk all the time about how subjective fear is, especially fear in movies and like what scares us. And there's a lot of stuff in here that it's not like other horror movies, and especially not for the time. It's a more quiet, oppressive horror. It's become very influential in that way. I think there has been other movies that have tried to do similar sort of atmospheres, and they're always going to be somewhat divisive, whether or not people find that frightening. I honestly find that more frightening than a lot of the more in-your-face stuff. Not that I can't occasionally get behind those kind of things, but it asks a little more from the viewer, and I like that. And so I do come away with this with like at least an untarnished opinion of The Shining. Like I still like it just as much. I'm just annoyed with these people more than anything.
That we don't know, these random people, the voices.
And like the fact that this documentary exists, I ultimately don't know if it's a good thing, because even if its point is to point out how wild these people are, I think this has helped perpetuate this moon landing stuff at the very least, and I think that is actually detrimental to society at a certain point.
Yeah, like I said, I think it was a lot more fun long ago, but it just feels a little more like close to home now.
It's too real,
like,
right?
Know,
it's like
man.
These people are real, and they start believing wild shit. And then the thing is, like, as soon as you start buying into the perspective that our government is capable of such things and is lying on such a scale, that leads you right down some very dangerous territory and some very wild. Like all of a sudden, everything becomes believable. You know, you start believing about anti-vax shit. You start believing about QAnon shit. That Donald Trump is actually the head of a cult, and then he's fighting against a cult, whatever it is, and they're like a pedophile cult, and he's fighting them, and he's like our secret champion. Like all this shit becomes plausible if you believe like the government is capable of this kind of stuff. And
well, that's what I was gonna say. Is just like this isn't the only shit that they're like this about, right? In their lives, it's not just The Shining. It's I'm sure everything. It's all encompassing. They're they're like, my neighbor's fucking. They're staring at me through the window and shit. Like they're paranoid. They're going through life like that. So yeah,
that's some dangerous shit too. That's like people blow stuff up because they start believing that stuff. It's like it's not a joke sometimes, and like I do think there was a time before, and there was a time after some recent events that does change a little bit of like how much we can have fun with this kind of stuff without it being getting too real too quickly. But I think in that spirit, I think it's time to end this one before we get too real. This has been, it's fun to talk about at the very least, and hopefully enjoyable. We should have said at the start, it's not like you need to watch this to enjoy, I think, and hear about some of these wild theories. Hopefully you had fun with this. All right, until next time.
Keep adapting.